Welcome to our Spring 2021 MSTEP Administration Training for Building and District Assessment Coordinators. This chapter will review important information and tasks that need to be done before testing. I am Phoebe Gose, the MSTEP Administration and Reporting Consultant for the Michigan Department of Education. Before we get started, I want to note that in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the health, safety, and well-being of students, educators, and their families is MDE's first priority. MDE has submitted a request to the U.S. Department of Education to waive certain assessment and accountability requirements. At this point, we have not received an assessment waiver, so MDE and schools must continue to prepare for the federal and state required spring assessments. Next, let's start with some notes regarding how the COVID-19 pandemic will or will not impact testing. First, there is no remote option for administration of the MSTEP. All tests must be administered in person by an in-person test administrator. Second, sometimes we refer to virtual schools in our documentation and in this presentation. So to be clear, virtual schools are schools that always provide instruction virtually, like cyber schools. We are not talking about schools that provide remote instruction as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic in those instances. This is an important distinction to remember. Next, there's a new page in the OEAA secure site that allows you to communicate with OEAA about COVID-related school closures. This is a place for documentation and communication, but doesn't impact accountability at all. There's a slide in this presentation where I'll go into more information about the page. Finally, and you'll probably hear this a few more times in this presentation, but it's especially important this year, make sure you're signed up for Spotlight. As things change or we have updated information, we communicate that through the Spotlight. So that's the best way for you to make sure you're getting the most up-to-date information that we have. I'm going to begin this training session by introducing everything that's new for the MSTEP in 2021. As a note here, we didn't make significant changes to the MSTEP for Spring 2021 administration. However, there were some updates that were planned for Spring 2020 that weren't implemented when testing was canceled. So the items included as new are just kind of new. I will identify a couple of spots with new for 2021 information. Next, I will review the tasks that need to be done in the OEAA secure site. eDirect has been updated and is now called the DRC Insight Portal. We will review the tasks that are done in the DRC Insight Portal. Students and supports and accommodations will be discussed, and then I will discuss what needs to be done to prepare staff and students for the MSTEP. Social Studies is now a one-part test for all tested grades, grades 5, 8, and 11. Science will be operational this year. There are 2 parts for grades 5 and 8 and 1 part for grade 11. The 2021 Important Dates Excel file is available and allows users to filter according to assessment program, whether they are looking at online or paper pencil testing, testing window, and more. In addition to the Excel file, we also have created a Google Calendar that you can view all of the assessment program dates from. You have the ability to filter which assessment programs to view on the calendar. And we still have all of the PDFs available with different assessment programs and groups of assessment programs listed. Go to the MSTEP webpage to view the PDFs, Excel file, and/or the Google Calendar. The new Assessment Calendars page pulls together all of the different formats available of important dates documents, PDFs, Google Calendars, and the Excel file of important dates. You access this page by going to the MSTEP webpage, www.michigan.gov/MSTEP, and then select Important Dates under the Current Assessment Administration section. Once there, you can download a PDF, the Google Calendar, or Excel files of important dates. All MSTEP assessments will have TTS available on direction screens. You do not need to assign this through the DRC Insight portal. District or building assessment coordinators need to decide whether to use TTS for directions in their district or school, and let test administrators know which directions to use when administering the assessment. The test administrator's directions and manual documents include sections to use both for administering with TTS for directions and when not using TTS for directions. When using TTS for directions, there are a few screens that the whole class does together, and then the directions are provided to instruct students to begin TTS. A note for those schools that elect not to use TTS for directions: the audio check exists on all tests now. That means you could have students in your session who are not using TTS as a designated support or accommodation, who will still have to complete the audio check in order to move past that screen, even if they do not have or need headphones. In order to avoid the sound playing aloud in the classroom, saying "if you can hear my voice, select the sound is working" button from each student's computer, all testing devices not using audio during the test should be muted before logging into Insight. You'll likely have test sessions that have some students using TTS and some who are not. There are directions provided for test administrators to read based on the different actions students should take on the audio check screen. The test administrator's directions and manuals were developed last year, but may be new to test administrators this year. They combined the content from the test administration manual that test administrators used to read there. So now, test administrators read the test administrator's directions and manual only and have all of the information they need. The Test Administration Training Toolkit is available. This was also available in 2020, but if you did not get a chance to check this resource out, be sure to take a look. You can use it as a building or district assessment coordinator to verify that you are including all of the content in your training, and test administrators can use it to verify they've received training and understand all of the information they need to know. The Test Administration Training Toolkit also includes a PowerPoint template that you can use to help prepare for test administration training that must be provided to test administrators and proctors. It includes required information and places to modify in order to include information from your local building or district, including who to know and who to contact with testing-related questions, specific cell phone requirements, your testing schedule, and details about how to handle secure test materials. There are updated requirements for test security training. These were also required last year, but I've kept it listed as new because it might be new for some folks, depending on where they were at in preparing for testing last year when it was canceled. Assessment coordinators are required to complete both the test security modules and read the Assessment Integrity Guide, or AIG. Test administrators have to do one of these: either complete the test security modules or read the AIG. Anyone who has already completed the test security modules can take the refresher course in place of the full test security modules. To do this, you log in to your Michigan virtual account and select the MDE Assessment Security Training modules. If the system recognizes that you have already completed the full course, it will deliver the refresher course to you. More information is available on the MSTEP webpage, www.michigan.gov/MSTEP. As an important note, test security training does not replace required test administration training. Both are required. There are some updates to required documentation for some incident reports. One update is when a test is administered without a required designated support or accommodation. For example, TTS. TTS is a designated support when administered for mathematics, science, or social studies, and when not reading passages for ELA. However, TTS may be a required accommodation according to a student's IEP. So if this occurs for your student, where they have a required accommodation to have TTS available on a mathematics assessment, for example, then treat it as an accommodation in this situation. So if you have a test where a student didn't receive a designated support, you submit the incident report and use the MDE template that indicates to the parent the reason for the retest, and the parent signs to approve or not the student retaking the entire test. In addition, the educator responsible for day-to-day instruction in the content area needs to sign the form affirming the student uses the designated support as a part of daily instruction. If you have a student who has a required accommodation that they didn't receive, then you still use the form notifying the parent and documentation of parent permission to retest, and you also need to submit the appropriate page or pages from the IEP or Section 504 plan that indicate the required accommodation for that content area test. As a note, we do get a number of these types of incident reports this year, and for each one, it means a student has to redo work they've already done. So to avoid this, be sure you are assigning supports and accommodations correctly in the DRC Insight portal. In addition, remember that you have to assign all embedded supports and accommodations before you print any test tickets. If you print test tickets and then assign the supports and accommodations, they will not be available on the student's tests. We've added these three scenarios where a regeneration is possible if you can document parent permission and provide verification of the occurrence of the incident. In order to have any of these regenerated, it is required to submit the incident report on the day that it occurred. MDE anticipates that you will not have the required documentation in time to submit on the same day of the incident, and that's okay. Just fill out what occurred, identify the impacted student and test, and then we will work with you to get the documentation together. But the report has to be submitted on the day of the incident for these situations. These three instances are if a student is ill while testing and then goes home on that day. The thinking here is that if a student sat to take a test while not feeling well, then if parents agree, it would help provide more valid assessment results if the student completed the test when they are feeling better. If you have a student who spends less than 15 total minutes in the test, for this one you'll need parent permission, but MDE can see how much time was spent in the test through DRC, so there's not another verification document necessary. But the test has to have been submitted and the student spent less than 15 minutes from beginning the test to submission. Finally, if a student has prescribed medication that they did not take prior to testing on test day. Again, these have to be submitted on the day the incident occurred, and we can get documentation together after it's submitted. You probably saw this last year at some point, but eDirect is now the DRC Insight portal. It looks like this when you enter, but then it's pretty much the same once you enter the site. Off-site testing is testing that's done off-site for students who are expelled with services, or students who are receiving homebound students, or virtual schools. Again, schools whose regular instructional program is virtual, not for schools who are teaching remotely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The request for off-site test administration is submitted through the OEAA Secure site, and the window is open until May 20. Here are a couple of updates that actually are new for the Spring 2021 administration. For the calculator policy, there's been no change for mathematics at all. Grades 3, 4, and 5 cannot use a calculator, even as an accommodation, because it changes the construct of the test. And grades 6 and 7 calculators are not allowed for anyone on Part 1 of the paper-pencil assessment. For students in grades 6 and 7 testing online, the calculators are embedded into the assessment on items for which they are available, and handheld calculators are only allowed as an accommodation. What is new is that calculators are allowed on the science assessment for all items on both parts in all tested grades, grades 5, 8, and 11. For grade 5, students use the basic calculator, and grades 8 and 11 use the scientific calculator. New to the Spring 2021 administration is the Desmos calculator. Students can view the tutorials for both the basic calculator and scientific calculator and practice using the Desmos calculator in the OTTs. You can also find more information about the Desmos calculators at www.desmos.com. This is another actually new item for spring 2021, the COVID-19 school closures page that has been added to the OEAA secure site. This page is available under the Assessment Registration tab on the secure site. Use this form to document your school's closure dates and dates of remote instruction that are related to the COVID-19 pandemic. This form provides a way for schools to document their COVID-related closures and for MDE to understand which schools and districts are impacted by COVID closures. It does not remove or impact accountability requirements at this time. Watch the spotlight for the most up-to-date information about accountability requirements. Unless there is a change in the legislation, MDE must still prepare for the implementation of the Read by Grade 3 legislation. At the time of this presentation, Read by Grade 3 legislation is still in effect, including using the M-STEP results to identify third grade students who require support for reading and who are eligible for grade retention. Until or unless the law is modified, OEAA must continue planning for the full implementation of the law. Any changes or updates will be promptly communicated through Spotlight. So, to determine students who meet requirements, need support, or are eligible for retention, MDE will use preliminary scale scores. You can see here, students scoring higher than 1271 will meet the requirements of the law. Students scoring between 1253 and 1271 will be identified as need support. And students scoring below 1253 will be eligible for retention. According to the requirements of the legislation, letters will be sent by CEPI directly to parents of students who are eligible for retention. Schools will be able to view student preliminary scores within 48 hours of the student submitting the test, and usually by the next day. There will be an indicator on the Grade 3 ELA reports so that schools can monitor the preliminary reports to know which students are eligible for retention before parents begin receiving their letters. I'm going to take a few minutes here to review student supports and accommodations. During testing, issues with supports and accommodations are a frequent testing irregularity that is reported through our incident reporting tool. An accurate identification of student-designated supports and accommodations before testing begins can help prevent a lot of these issues from occurring. So I'm going to walk through what they are, some suggestions for helping keep track of what supports each student needs, and then how to assign them in the DRC Insight portal. First, when we speak about universal tools, these are tools that are available to all students. An example of this would be the highlighter. It's available on each item on the online test for all students, and schools are allowed to provide highlighters for paper pencil testers to students. Just make sure they're not using it on the answer document. So this is a tool for everyone. Students can use it if they find it helpful. Designated supports are available for students based on their specific need. These are decided by educators, and they should be supports that are used in day-to-day instruction. The most common example of a designated support is TTS for items only. Again, this should be decided individually by student, never assigned to a whole class, grade, or content area, and it should be something that the student is using in day-to-day instruction. Finally, accommodations are available for students whose IEP or 504 plan documents the need for this accommodation. To help clarify about text-to-speech, or TTS, there are two different types of TTS. TTS for items only, or just TTS, and TTS passage. TTS is a designated support. It reads only the items on the test and can be assigned based on the specific need of the student. TTS Passage is an accommodation that is available for grades 6 and 7 ELA only. TTS Passage reads the passages and the items. This can only be assigned if TTS or Read Aloud is listed in the student's IEP or 504 plan. This is not available as an accommodation at all for anyone for grades 3 through 5 ELA, because it would change the construct, or what is being measured, on the test. This slide reviews what is included for TTS and TTS Passage. TTS is available in all content areas, and it will read the question and answer options. There are no reading passages on the mathematics, science, or social studies assessments. TTS Passage for grades 6 and 7 ELA will read the passages as well as the question and answer options. It is important that you take time before testing to create a process that you will use to review which tools students are using in the classroom as a first step in thinking about supports and accommodations on the test. Then, you should work with your team to determine if there is a match between what is used in the classroom and what is available on the M-Step. Do not review the list of available designated supports and accommodations and then try to fit them to the student or students. Start with what happens in the classroom, then find what matches in the supports and accommodations guidance. You can find the supports and accommodations guidance document on the MSTEP webpage at www.michigan.gov/mstep under the Student Supports and Accommodations heading. There is some good information in there, including some template documents that will help you keep track of what you should and should not be assigning for students. Make sure you take a look at this document. Before testing, which means now, you should meet with staff who are involved in students' day-to-day instruction, including special education staff, to determine what students need during testing. Once you have this information, either using the template provided on the MSTEP webpage or in another format that you have, then you should assign all of the universal tools, designated supports, or accommodations in the DRC Insight portal. Once this is done, make sure that your test administrators are made aware of all supports and accommodations that students need in their test sessions. This is important because every support or accommodation is necessarily delivered through the testing engine, and if there are any issues with anything, the students will be notifying their test administrator. Some schools use Google Sheets or other collaborative software to make sure that everyone is aware of what's needed. Again, you can use this process or another process, but the important thing is that all test administrators know every support and accommodation that each student should or should not have in each test session. This is an important role of the assessment coordinator. Then, once everyone knows everything they need to know, you'll need to make sure they have access to all of the materials to provide the supports and accommodations. This means things like headphones for TTS or calculators for grade 6 or 7 students who are using a handheld calculator. You assign students universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations in the DRC Insight portal to ensure that students receive the appropriate supports during testing. You can see whether a support is a universal tool, abbreviated UT, designated support, abbreviated DS, or accommodation, abbreviated AC, in the DRC Insight portal on the screen where you assigned them. Make sure that you are working with educators to assign these appropriately. Also, you must assign all designated supports and accommodations before you print any test tickets. If test tickets are printed before you have assigned designated supports and accommodations, they will not be available on the student's test. Next, we're going to discuss the tasks that need to be done before testing. This is the bulk of the tasks that need to be done by assessment coordinators, getting everything set up and ready for the test administration. We'll go through each of these tasks one by one. I will go over general information about each of these tasks, but in some cases I will refer you to training resources that are extant on the web pages or in other trainings. Before testing begins, you're going to need to create your building or district's testing schedule. These are required to be maintained for 3 years, and they must include the information included on this slide: district and building name, building assessment coordinator's name, the date, location, and starting and ending time of the test administration, the assessment grade and content, and finally test administrator and proctor names for each testing session. There's a template available in the Assessment Integrity Guide on the MSTEP webpage. Again, that's www.michigan.gov/MSTEP under the Current Assessment Administration section. You're not required to use the template. You can create your own, but you need to have this information on it. Test session time estimates have not changed for MSTEP. You can see here the estimates for the time students spend testing. For your schedules, you need to add in time for test administrators to read directions, for students to log in, and for other administrative tasks. There are MDE recommendations for how to schedule the MSTEP in the TAM. Also remember that MSTEP is not a timed test. Students need to be provided adequate time for them to complete testing. For ELA, student testing should take approximately 2 hours. Math, grades 3 through 5, is estimated for an hour and a half and 2 hours in grades 6 and 7. And science is estimated in 5th grade for 45 minutes per part. And finally, 60 minutes is the estimate for social studies. These estimates are for grade 8. Remember, unlike PSAT 8-9, the MSTEP is not a timed test. Students should be given the time they need to complete. Science is again estimated at 45 minutes for each part, and social studies for an hour. Grade 11 has an estimate of an hour and a half for science and 30 minutes for social studies. You can also see the college entrance and work skills times here. Again, remember that MSTEP is not timed. We'll start with the OEAA Secure site. This is a site that you will use quite frequently throughout testing. It's an OEAA web application that is used for many testing tasks, and a lot of those tasks are done before testing, but a few are during and after testing. In the OEAA Secure site, you will pre-identify your students for all state assessments. It's where you print barcode labels for paper pencil answer documents, in case you are not able to pre-ID before the deadline for shipping of barcode labels. As a note, if you did have any students pre-ID'd for paper pencil testing before the initial material order window, you will get a blank sheet of labels that you can use to print your barcode labels from the Secure site. Which leads me to ordering paper pencil assessment materials. Your pre-ID list of students is what determines your initial material order, unless you go in and select additional items at that time. If something changes after the initial material order, you have a student who needs paper pencil materials that you didn't previously plan on, or you have students enroll who need testing materials, then you can place an additional material order according to the dates in the important dates documents. And you place all of these orders in the OEAA Secure site. Prior to February 23, you could group students into online sessions in the OEAA Secure site, and these were pulled into the DRC Insight portal. It's okay if you didn't get this done by February 23. You can still group students into online test sessions within the DRC Insight portal. That opened on March 5. During testing, you report any testing irregularities for MSTEP in the OEAA Secure site. And after testing, you use the Secure site for the accountable students and test verification processes, and you access student test scores, data files, and reports through the OEAA Secure site. So as you can see, you're going to need access to the OEAA Secure site throughout testing. If you don't already have access, this slide tells you how to fix that. You log into the OEAA Secure site using your MEIS login and password. That will bring up the Request Access page, which gives you directions for how to request access. If you need detailed instructions or additional help, then the Secure Site training page can help you. Go to www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining and click right at the top the link, How do I get access to the Secure Site? The OEAA pre-ID'd students based on your fall MSDS General Collection, Student Count Day, on January 6th. There are no additional polls for pre-ID that are done by MDE after that date, which means that any enrollment changes after your fall Student Count Day needs to be inputted by you into the OEAA Secure site. Depending on the changes that you've had in enrollment and the accuracy of your MSDS general collection data for your school or district, you can pre-ID students one at a time using the student search, or if you have a lot of students to add, you can follow the pre-ID file format and template to upload a lot of students. Or, if you are confident in the accuracy of the data in MSDS, you can use the MSDS Copy function on the secure site. There is a ton of step-by-step instructions available for each of these methods of pre-ID on the secure site training page. Again, it's www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining. And I will suggest you may want to either memorize that web address or add it to your bookmarks in your browser. Again, it's helpful for pre-ID and for login information, but it has help documents for anything you need to do in the secure site. This is a screenshot of the student search page with obfuscated data on it. The first column lists the student's UIC, and then where the arrow is where the student name is. Then you can see birth date and gender. As a note, you can search by student information, which is what is selected here in the upper left, or by UIC or barcode. MDE does suggest that you use, or at least verify, the student UIC number. There are a lot of students who have the same or similar name, and even birth date isn't always different among students in the whole state who have the same name. We do get a few incident reports each year where the wrong UIC student has been pre-ID'd for testing, and then they complete the test with the wrong UIC, and it's showing out of level because they took a test that is in a different grade than the actual student, or the student who was actually expected to test according to MSDS is listed as not tested because the student took the test under the wrong UIC. These are difficult to resolve because it's a manual process to move student test data from one UIC to another, and it is not something that is often done. So be sure that you pre-ID the correct student with the correct UIC, and you can avoid all of that. So once you've found the student, and you know that you have the correct UIC, then you can select Pre-ID Student. That is this screen that you see here. You'll need to make sure that you pre-ID to the correct test cycle, ISD, district, school, and grade. Also, you can see the required information is listed here in red. At the bottom of the screen, you can see other student information, such as if the student is identified as EL, former English learner, special education, homeschooled, migrant, economically disadvantaged, homeless, in foster care, or military connected. This is where you'll enter the test mode. That means paper, pencil, or online. And you can also assign your reporting codes or research codes here. Next, we will discuss pre-identification using the pre-ID file upload. On the login screen, you can download the pre-ID file upload template. This is important because you need to use this specific layout in order for your upload to work in the OEAA secure site. And you need to follow the codes and abbreviations that are listed in the template. I'll show you a part of that template on the next page. So this is just a section of the pre-ID file upload template. You can see that it shows you the field length, the data type to be inputted, and then the field name and the specific information about how to complete each row. You can see, for example, the SDS grade code must be inputted, and you input kindergarten as 00, not K or just 0. You can also see the requirements for inputting the student last, first, and middle name, and the specific codes used to identify student ethnicity. Again, this is a part of the pre-ID file upload template. If you are going to pre-ID using this method, make sure that you follow the requirements listed here. So here's your pre-ID file upload document. It has the columns already listed, and you just input the data according to the requirements listed in the template. Just as an idea, which at this point would have to be for next year, some schools will maintain this document from student count day in the fall up until it's time to pre-ID students, so that this information has been inputted as students enroll, and then it's all ready to go when you are ready to validate your pre-ID student list. This screen shows you the MSDS Copy process for pre-identifying students. You can see in the box under Pre-ID Method, the MSDS Copy option has been selected. It's important that you use the information as submitted in MSDS in order for this to work, and in order to make sure that you have accurate reporting of results, both for the students who are expected to test for accountability calculations, but also in order to view the students' results. Once you've inputted the information on the previous screen, you will view this screen, again obfuscated for privacy. You need to select the destination test cycle. That is the test cycle that you are pre-identifying the student to test in, then grade and content area. Here you can see the Mass Updates Assessment screen. From here, you can change the testing mode, online or paper pencil. You copy students from MSTEP to MyAccess. Remember when you do this to remove the student for MSTEP for that content area. And you can copy students from one component of MME to another component, all done as a group of students instead of individually. I have a note about pre-identification of students for MyAccess. Each year, MDE receives a few incident reports where a student has completed both the MSTEP and MyAccess assessment in the same content area. In order for this to occur, you have a student who sat down twice to take a test in the same content area, which is not something anyone wants to see happen. One reason that this happens is that an assessment coordinator either forgets or is not aware that the student who is pre-identified to MyAccess has to be removed from MSTEP. This is not automatic. Make sure that you remove students from MSTEP who are taking MyAccess in that content area. Another issue can happen if you haven't finalized your pre-ID list before students are pulled into the DRC Insight portal, which this year happened on February 23. If you have any students who are taking MyAccess in a content area that are still pre-ID'd to MSTEP in that content area on February 23, then they will be pulled into the DRC Insight portal, and once a student is pulled into the DRC Insight portal, they cannot be removed. When this happens, if the student is listed in a test session, then there will be test tickets generated and printed when you print test tickets. Once there is a printed test ticket, it is natural for the test administrator to administer the test, assuming that if a student has a test ticket, then the student should test. One way that some schools have solved this potential problem is to create a test session that is called not testing, or something like that, where they can put those students so that there is no test ticket printed out and therefore no reason for the test to be taken. Remember, accountability calculations are made based on MSDS enrollment data, not what's in the DRC Insight portal, so it is not an issue if you have students who are in the DRC Insight portal as not testing. If you need more information about how to use this screen, there are detailed step-by-step instructions available on the Secure Site training page, www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining. The pre-ID student report is available so that you can view students who are pre-identified for testing, including by grade and content area, mode of testing, that is paper, pencil, or online, and demographic information based on what exists in MSDS. You can use this page to unassign students from an assessment if you notice any errors in your pre-ID list. Here's what the pre-ID student report looks like. Each column can be filtered so that you can look at this list based on any of the listed categories. You can also see the total count pre-ID'd by content area and total according to test mode. Remember, you can unassign students from testing if you see them on this list, but they should not be. This is another opportunity to verify that your students who are taking MyAccess in a content area are not also pre-ID'd for MSTEP. Search by test period and then select Spring 2021. Barcode labels are required for all paper pencil answer documents. you have to have a student's barcode label for each content area on each student's answer document. If you pre-identified by February 27, then barcode labels will be printed and shipped with your initial material order. If not, then you have to print them from the OEAA secure site. To find barcode labels in the secure site, from this screen, you can search by test cycle, ISD, district, and school, and you can filter your results by student name, UIC, grade, or test mode, paper, pencil, or online, to print barcode labels. This note pops up on your screen when you select Print Barcodes on the lower left of the search results. There are specific labels and settings that are required when you're printing your barcodes, so make sure you read this so that your barcodes are printed correctly. Initial material orders were done through the OEAA secure site and are based on your pre-ID counts. Additional material orders will also be done in the OEAA secure site, and these are available once the IMOs have arrived in schools. Dates for each testing window are available in the Important Dates documents. Deliveries for AMOs are based on ordered materials. This is the Initial Material Orders screen, or IMOs. You search by test cycle, and then you can select your shipping destination and your delivery dates for each window. The first date listed is the default date, but you can change that in case there's something happening in your district or building during that week. The address listed is based on the address for the M-STEP coordinator in EEM. Make sure you verify that this is correct so that your materials are sent to the correct place. IMOs are automatically generated based on your pre-ID count. This window has closed for spring 2021, but you can view your order from this screen. You can still place material orders if you have any need for additional materials. The windows for additional material orders are listed here: April 8 through 27 at noon for grades 5, 8, and 11, and April 15 through May 11 for grades 3, 4, 6, and 7. These dates are also listed in the Important Dates documents. We are asked frequently what comes in the initial material orders, which are based on pre-ID count. So here we go. Everyone receives OEAA security compliance forms, the return kit, which includes the FedEx air bills, instructions for materials return, scorable labels, and special handling envelopes, plus they receive the test administrator's directions and manual, either online and/or paper pencil depending on the pre-ID count. The test administrator's directions and manuals are sent at a rate of 1 per 20 pre-ID'd students. Then, for schools that only have online testing in their pre-ID count, if they have 6th or 7th grade students, they will also receive 1 graph paper per student. For schools that have any pre-ID for paper pencil testing, then they will receive blank labels that you can print barcodes on if necessary, listening scripts and CDs, of course the test booklets and answer documents, and your printed pre-ID labels based on the students who are pre-ID to paper pencil testing on or before February 17. Make sure that you inventory all of your secure materials when you receive them. Use the packing slip that's included in your delivery to verify that everything listed on the packing slip is included in your order. If there are any secure materials that are required to be returned to the scoring contractor, such as listening scripts or CDs, accommodated versions of the test booklets, etc., that are not returned, you will be required to locate the missing materials. You cannot say at that point that you didn't receive them. You need to tell us that at the time of delivery. If you do your inventory and there are any materials that are on your packing list that you did not receive, send us an email at mde-oeaa@michigan.gov so that we can locate the missing secure materials. On our random visits to schools, management of secure materials comes up as an issue in some schools, so this slide is a reminder. All secure materials must be retained in a secure, locked location within the school. This cannot be just in a locked office, like on the principal or assessment coordinator's desk, because it's possible that the office can be left unattended and the materials are not secure. They need to be locked in a cabinet or drawer when not in use. Next, all secure materials must be distributed and collected each day. Secure materials for online testing are test rosters and test tickets, and any used scratch or graph paper. For paper pencil testing, secure materials include test booklets, used answer documents, L1 glossaries, any accommodated version of the test, listening CDs or scripts, reader's scripts, used scratch or graph paper, and more. Make sure you review the TAM if you have any questions about what are secure materials, and look on page 63 for more information about materials and materials handling. The DRC Insight Portal is the system used to manage online test sessions, assign designated supports and accommodations, to print and manage test tickets, and during testing to monitor student testing status. Access to the DRC Insight Portal is granted through the OEAA Secure Site based on role assignment in the OEAA Secure Site. If you need help getting access to the DRC Insight Portal, go to the Secure Site training page at www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining and select the document under Security called How Do I Get Access to DRC Insight Portal? The DRC Insight Portal became available for online test administration tasks beginning on March 5. Students who were pre-ID'd and put into online test sessions in the OEAA Secure Site by February 23rd were copied into the DRC Insight Portal and put into test sessions. But you can still pre-ID students in the OEAA Secure Site, and these students will be copied into the DRC Insight Portal 3 times a day. These students who are pre-ID'd after February 23 will need to be added to test sessions in the DRC Insight Portal. Once your pre-ID is done, test sessions are set up, and you have assigned all universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations. Then you can print your test tickets. A quick reminder, you have to assign universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations before test tickets are generated. If you print your test tickets and then add a support afterwards, the support won't be available when the student logs in to test. To print your test tickets, log into the DRC Insight Portal, select Test Management, and then go to Manage Test Sessions. Complete the administration, entity information, grade, and content area, and select Show Sessions. This will bring back all of the test sessions according to your filtered results. You can select Test Session test tickets to print, or you can select Print All Tickets to print all of the test tickets for the filtered results shown. Test tickets can also be printed individually. You select the Edit Print icon shown in the first image, and then select the student or students whose test ticket you are printing, then select Print Selected. There are mini modules, each no longer than 5 minutes, that explain in detail how to do each function in the DRC Insight Portal. Once you're logged in, go to General Information, then select the Documents tab and filter on Mini Modules and select Show Documents. It is important that students are aware of how the items on the test work and that the tools that are available to them before testing day. This ensures that students can focus on the content and not the testing engine on testing day. There are student tutorials and online tools training, or OTTs, that should be used. You can launch Insight, and the tutorials are the yellow link at the bottom, and you can see the OTTs listed under each assessment logo. You can also access them from the MSTEP webpage, as long as you use a Chrome browser. Go to the Parent Student Information section and select the link Online Practice for MSTEP ELA, Math, Science, and Social Studies. The page that opens has a link to the OTTs in the top portion of the page. To prepare students for testing, MDE recommends that a teacher view the tutorials with the students as a class and then model the use of OTTs. Once students are familiar with this, then they should have an opportunity to practice with the OTTs on the device they will use during testing. The image here shows you what the tutorials look like. They're each a short video that focuses on one thing in the test. They use a child voice and there is closed captioning on each tutorial. Here is a reminder about the scratch paper and calculator policies. The full policies are available on the MSTEP webpage, in the Test Administration Manual, and in the Test Administrator's Directions and Manual documents. For scratch paper, it is available as a universal tool. On the mathematics test, graph paper is required for grades 6 and 7 and optional for grades 3 through 5. Don't forget that used scratch paper is a secure material. Be sure to collect after testing for secure destruction. I discussed the calculator policy at the beginning of this presentation, but again, you can find this on the MSTEP webpage, in the TAM, and in the Test Administrator's Directions and Manuals documents. And again, there are no changes in the calculator policy for mathematics. The update was to allow a basic calculator for grade 5 science and a scientific calculator for grades 8 and 11 science. Are you signed up for the Spotlight? It's our weekly newsletter that includes all of the important information that you need to know throughout the year. It comes out on Thursday afternoon. If you're not signed up yet, go to www.michigan.gov/mstep. Scroll down until you see the Spotlight logo, click on it, and you can sign up there. Thanks for joining me for this first chapter of the 2021 MSTEP Administration Training. You can see our contact information here if you have any questions. Email mde-oeaa@michigan.gov or call 877-560-8378 and follow the prompts. Also, if you have ideas, suggestions, or ways that you manage your test administration tasks that you think other schools might find helpful, send us an email. We include those in the Spotlight articles, and all of the helpful hints that you see in the TAM came from tips from folks from the field. Let us know what's working for you. Make sure that you join me for Chapter 2 of this training, where we will discuss the tasks that need to be done during testing.